I didn't notice the child at first. I was too busy trying to make sense of the message blinking on my phone screen. But then I saw her, small, quiet, motionless, sitting alone at gate C, a faded suitcase beside her feet, legs swinging nervously above the polished floor. Her name was Maya, 11 years old, though in that moment she looked much younger. She sat upright, eyes tracking everyone who passed, as if searching for approval or permission to breathe. No adult nearby claimed her. No one even glanced her way, until I did. I walked slowly, not wanting to frighten her. When she finally turned toward me, I saw redness around her eyes, the residue of recent tears. She didn't speak. She only tightened her grip on the suitcase handle as if someone might take it away. "Maya?" I asked softly. She nodded. There was nothing theatrical about the moment. No dramatic music, no shouting. Just a quiet exchange that somehow split my life into a before and an after. On the phone, the message from her mother pulsed like a taunt. "Change of plans. Please keep her until we get back. I can't deal with this right now." No explanation, no courtesy, nothing. Her mother, Ayana, had been my stepsister for 10 complicated years, and Maya was technically my niece, though Ayana had never allowed me to be anything more than a babysitter when things became too inconvenient. Maya's father wasn't in the picture. He had drifted away years earlier, leaving only vague text messages and broken promises behind him. Still, I never imagined things would reach this point. I guided Maya outside toward my car without asking questions. She didn't try to speak, not even when I buckled her in. She stared out the window, expressionless, as we pulled into traffic. Only once, at a red light, did a small whisper escape her lips. "Am I staying with you forever?" I couldn't answer. I didn't know yet. I hadn't processed anything. All I could say was the simplest truth I had at the moment. "You're staying with me now." Her shoulders lowered, just barely. A breath she'd been holding finally released. Back at the house, she walked quietly through the hallway as if stepping on sacred ground. By instinct, she removed her shoes at the door, neatly placing them side by side, the kind of automatic obedience learned through fear, not manners. I made her a grilled cheese sandwich. She ate in slow, uncertain bites, watching me as if waiting for permission between each chew. When she finished, she asked in a small voice, "Do I go to my room now?" I didn't correct her, though technically the guest room wasn't her room. Not yet. But something inside me knew better than to deny her the hope. "Yes," I said gently, "your room is ready." But that night, long after she slept, I finally understood what my stepsister had really done. This wasn't babysitting. This was abandonment. And I hadn't even seen the worst part yet. Before I continue, make sure to subscribe for more emotionally powerful story series like this, new chapters every week. Maya woke before sunrise. I could hear her moving around the guest room carefully, quietly, like someone trying not to disturb an invisible authority. When I tapped gently on the door, she opened it instantly, as if she'd been waiting for instructions. She was still wearing yesterday's clothes. "You didn't change into pajamas?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light. Her eyes dropped. "I didn't know if I could use the closet." That sentence weighed more than any suitcase she carried. I told her of course she could, that everything in this house was for her to use. But I said it too quickly, like a line in a script I hadn't rehearsed. The truth was, I didn't know what rules existed anymore. I was improvising motherhood in real time with a child who'd already learned to apologize for breathing. By 8 a.m., my phone started buzzing. Not a call, not from Ayana, just a forwarded airline itinerary showing her and her new husband headed to a resort in Costa Rica. A caption followed minutes later. "We'll reconnect when we return. No emergencies, please." Reconnect. As if Maya were a Wi-Fi signal she could turn off and on. I placed my phone face down on the counter before I threw it across the kitchen. Maya ate breakfast slowly. Oatmeal, apples. Every movement deliberate, every crumb carefully tracked. I tried making casual conversation, favorite colors, favorite school subjects, but each question seemed to confuse her, as if no one had asked her to have preferences before. When I asked about school, she frowned. "I used to go, but sometimes I stayed home. Sometimes a lot." Her tone wasn't defensive, just factual, like someone reading weather forecasts, cloudy, rainy, neglectful. I wanted to ask more. I wanted every truth all at once. But children don't unfold like that. Not ones who've lived through silence. Around noon, my best friend Jonah stopped by. He had keys to my house because for years he was the emergency contact for my dog before my dog passed away. When he walked in, Maya stood up abruptly, hands at her sides, waiting for approval or correction. He froze, recognizing trauma in the shape of a child. "Hey there," he said gently. "Mind if I say hi?" She nodded, but took 2 steps back. Jonah pulled me aside into the hallway. "What's going on? Naomi, she looks terrified." I showed him the message. I showed him the itinerary. I told him everything except the roaring panic inside me. He exhaled sharply. "Naomi, this isn't a favor. This is abandonment. Child abandonment." Hearing someone else say the words out loud made my knees feel weak. "I need to talk to someone who knows what to do," I whispered. He didn't hesitate. "Call a lawyer. Today, not tomorrow." And that was the moment I realized this would not be a temporary situation, no matter what that vacation flight itinerary claimed. But I didn't know that someone else would step forward too and change everything that was about to come next. That evening, after Maya fell asleep, clutching a stuffed bear I dug out of my attic, I sat alone at the kitchen table, scrolling through my contacts. Family, acquaintances, college friends, co-workers, anyone who might have advice worth listening to. My thumb hovered over names, but instinct kept circling back to one, Laura Benton, an attorney I'd met years ago through a volunteer organization. She handled juvenile cases back when we were barely acquaintances who only spoke over coffee at community fundraisers. I wasn't sure she'd remember me. I wasn't sure I wanted her to remember me. Not like this. Frantic, confused, suddenly responsible for a child who wasn't mine on paper, but certainly mine in every other way that mattered. Still, I typed the message. "Laura, it's Naomi. Something serious happened with Maya. I don't know what to do. Could we talk?" I sent it before fear convinced me otherwise. To my surprise, she replied in under 3 minutes. "Call me. Now." When her voice came through the speaker, it was steadier than mine. I hurried through the explanation. Airport, suitcase, texts, Costa Rica, and waited for judgment. Instead, she sighed the kind of sigh people learn after 20 years of seeing the world at its worst. "Naomi, listen carefully. Leaving a minor with no official arrangement and boarding an international flight, that's legally classified as abandonment, especially if there's a history." "There is," I admitted quietly. "She's missed school. A lot. And she's afraid of taking up space." Laura didn't interrupt. She just breathed, patiently, like she was assembling a case in her mind already. "First step," she said, finally, "you keep her with you. Second step, you document everything. Screenshots, messages, dates, anything she says in her own words. Third, do not reach out to Ayanna. She relinquished responsibility the second she walked away. Relinquished. That word hit harder than abandonment. Abandonment sounded careless. Relinquishment sounded deliberate. What happens now? I asked. Laura paused. Children deserve safety before reunification. We'll file an emergency care petition first thing tomorrow. But Naomi, this isn't a babysitting crisis. This is custody territory. Custody. The word felt heavy, final. That night, I checked on Maya twice. Each time she was curled into a corner of the bed instead of the pillow, like she didn't trust the mattress not to reject her. Her breathing was shallow, her hands clenched. Even asleep, she looked braced for something terrible. And that's when fear and certainty folded into the same thought. Ayanna didn't just need a break. She wanted distance. And she believed I wouldn't fight back. But she had miscalculated something crucial. Maya wasn't just a responsibility. She was family. And family wasn't something you sent away with a plane ticket and an emoji. But I had no idea Ayanna was already preparing her own story, and it would be much darker than anything I imagined. Laura filed the emergency petition first thing the next morning. She warned me not to expect miracles overnight, but her voice carried a confidence that kept my pulse steady. She promised to reach out again once the clerk processed the paperwork. Until then, she advised me to do something I'd nearly forgotten how to do properly. Observe. Observe Maya. Observe her behavior. Observe the unspoken. I didn't need instructions for that part. Maya's silence spoke in paragraphs. When she woke up, she moved through the house like a polite visitor. She folded her blanket, lined up her shoes, wiped the cereal spill she didn't even cause. She apologized when I opened a window and the breeze knocked over a stack of mail. She apologized when the toaster popped too loudly. She apologized simply for existing in any space that wasn't perfectly still. "Sweetheart," I said gently, "you don't need to be sorry for anything." Her eyes flicked upward like she was searching for a trap in that sentence. I realized then she wasn't waiting for kindness. She was waiting for punishment. Later that afternoon, I took her to a nearby playground. She sat on the swing without swinging, hands wrapped so tightly around the chains that her knuckles turned white. Other children came and went, laughing, running, shouting, but Maya hardly blinked. "Do you want to play?" I asked. Her answer was quiet. "I don't know how." The words pierced something inside me I didn't know could hurt. "How about the slide?" I offered. She shook her head. "They'll get mad." "Who?" "People." Just that. People. As if the world itself were a punishment waiting to happen. When we returned home, she hesitated at the threshold, unsure if she was allowed to go inside without permission. I told her again, over and over, that she lived here now. She nodded politely, but her steps stayed small, careful, temporary. Nighttime was worse. She cried without making a sound. Not sobbing, not whimpering, just silent tears leaking from the sides of her closed eyes, soaking the pillow like rain soaking a street, quiet, constant, unstoppable. I sat beside her, whispering reassurances I wasn't sure she trusted. Eventually, exhaustion won over fear, and she drifted into a restless sleep. I stayed awake long after, replaying the day in my head. Every flinch, every apology, every moment she asked permission to simply exist. This wasn't just abandonment. It was training, conditioning. Someone had taught her to be invisible. Around midnight, my phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. "She's exaggerating. Don't encourage this. We'll discuss when we return." No greeting, no name, just that. Ayanna. And suddenly, I understood. She wasn't done. Not even close. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe to never miss the next part of this story. Each chapter gets deeper, and things are only beginning. The next morning, Laura called earlier than expected. Paperwork was already moving through the system, and she wanted to gather more evidence before Ayanna returned from her tropical escape. She instructed me to take photographs of everything Maya brought: the tiny suitcase with barely folded shirts, the worn sneakers, the toothbrush missing a cap, the single stuffed bear whose stitching had been repaired more than once. Neglect, Laura said firmly, is not just emotional. It's physical, educational, medical. Courts need proof of patterns. That word again, patterns. I hadn't noticed them before, not because they weren't there, but because I hadn't wanted to see them. I remembered birthdays Ayanna forgot, school events Maya didn't feel like attending, excuses that sounded harmless at the time, but now echoed with a chilling undertone. While Maya watched cartoons, eyes wide but posture tense, I carefully went through her suitcase. Only 2 full outfits, no jacket, no pajamas, 1 pair of socks, and worst of all, no school notebooks, no homework folder, no sign she'd been preparing for anything resembling structure. It looked less like packing and more like fleeing. After photographing everything, I contacted Maya's former school, pretending I needed records for a new enrollment. The receptionist's silence spoke volumes before her words did. Let me check. Oh, she's been marked absent 39 days this year. 39? Nearly 2 full months. My breath caught. Was there a medical excuse? Or a transfer form? She hesitated. We've sent emails, called. Sometimes a man answers, sometimes no one. We were planning to submit a welfare concern. My grip tightened around the phone. A welfare concern. They were already preparing to intervene before I even realized anything was wrong. When I told Laura what I learned, she didn't sound surprised. This strengthens the case. Document the call. Write down the date, time, and the name of the person you spoke to. I was starting to understand something painful. This wasn't one bad decision. This was history. A long, uninterrupted trail of neglect leading up to an airport drop-off. That night, I tucked Maya into bed again. She looked up at me with tired eyes, eyes that carried more knowledge than any 11-year-old deserved. Do you think she's coming back soon? She asked suddenly. My throat tightened. I don't know, sweetheart. She swallowed. Sometimes she says she wishes I was easier. It was such a simple sentence, but it broke the world open around us. Maya, I whispered, you are not difficult. She stared at me like no one had ever said that before. Silence stretched between us, heavy and fragile. Then she asked a question I wasn't prepared for. What happens if she doesn't want me anymore? And I had no answer ready for the truth I was about to discover next. Laura insisted I take Maya for a medical evaluation, not because she suspected visible injuries, but because courts relied heavily on professional documentation. So that afternoon, I drove her to a pediatric clinic a few blocks from my house, trying to sound cheerful, as if this were a normal errand instead of a legal necessity. Maya sat stiffly on the examination table, arms folded across her stomach, feet dangling above the tiled floor. The doctor, a calm, soft-spoken woman, asked gentle questions about sleep, appetite, and school. Maya answered with short, hesitant phrases, glancing at me for approval between each sentence. She has trouble sleeping, I admitted. Nightmares. The doctor nodded knowingly. When she asked to speak with Maya alone for a moment, Maya looked panicked, but I reassured her that I'd be right outside. The door closed, and suddenly my heartbeat felt louder than the hallway clock. I kept thinking over and over, whatever Maya said in that room mattered, maybe more than anything I could say. When the doctor finally opened the door, she motioned for me to step inside. Her expression had changed. Not angry, not alarmed, but deeply serious. Maya shows signs of chronic anxiety, she said quietly, and she mentions something that concerns me. I held my breath. She says she's afraid of doing the wrong thing because it means being ignored for days. She described being left alone in her room while the rest of the household socialized. She believes she's extra work and that silence is safer than asking for help. My stomach twisted. Maya also told me she's had long periods without attending school. She didn't know why, just that home felt easier. That's concerning. The doctor documented everything, signed it, sealed it, and placed the report inside a large envelope. "You're doing the right thing bringing her in," she added. I wasn't sure I believed that yet, but it helped hearing it. After the appointment, we stopped by a small bookstore cafe. I let Maya choose a treat. She picked hot chocolate and stared at it like it was something rare. We sat at a corner table, quietly sipping, listening to soft jazz drifting from ceiling speakers. Out of nowhere, Maya leaned in across the table and whispered, "Do you think she knows I'm not coming back?" I swallowed hard. Who? My mom. Before I could respond, tears filled his eyes. Not loud ones, just quiet spilling like he'd been holding them for months and they finally slipped through a crack he couldn't hide. I moved my chair next to hers and wrapped an arm around her shoulders. She didn't resist. She folded into me like she'd been waiting years to be held. That night, as I tucked her into bed, she whispered something I wasn't prepared for. "Auntie Naomi, if they come back, please don't let them take me." And that plea would become the very sentence a judge repeated later when everything exploded into a legal war I never expected to fight. I knew Ayanna would eventually notice Maya wasn't where she left her. Irresponsible people always return to the scene of convenience sooner or later. Still, I wasn't prepared for how quickly it happened. 3 days after the doctor's appointment, my phone lit up during dinner. The name flashing across the screen felt like a live wire. Ayanna. I didn't pick up. She called again and again. Then the texts began. "We're back. Coming tomorrow for her pickup. Hope she behaved. I'll swing by around noon. Don't worry about lunch. Make sure she has her things ready." Her things. As if Maya were luggage. As if her emotional state were a carry-on bag she could check back in whenever convenient. I sent every message to Laura. She responded immediately. "Do not reply. They are digging themselves deeper." That night, Maya heard the vibration from my phone and tensed, shoulders rising like she'd been struck by static electricity. "Is it her?" she whispered. "Yes," I admitted. She didn't ask anything else. She just quietly stood, gathered her backpack, and placed it by the front door, preparing for a departure like a child trained to pack and disappear. "Maya," I said firmly, "you're not going anywhere." She stared at the floor. Sometimes she changes her mind. Not about clothing, not about schedules, about her. The next morning, at exactly 10:47 a.m., Ayanna switched tactics. A softer text. "We should be reasonable. I'm sure Maya misses home. We'll make this easy." Easy, as if emotional abandonment were a scheduling conflict. Then another message, more clipped. "You don't have legal custody. This is kidnapping." I felt my spine tighten. Laura had prepared me for this exact line of attack, but seeing the accusation written out still felt like a punch. Before fear could root itself in my chest, my phone rang again, this time an unknown number. I answered cautiously. A calm professional voice introduced herself. Mrs. Naomi, my name is Detective Sanders with Child Services. We received a report from Ms. Ayana claiming you unlawfully detained her daughter. We need clarification. My pulse surged. But before I could panic, the detective continued. And Naomi, the detective added, lowering her voice, I've seen this pattern before. Keep documenting everything. Just before hanging up, she said something I'd remember later. Children don't get abandoned overnight. It happens layer by layer. Thank you for stopping the next layer. That night, Maya slept more deeply than usual, maybe because the phone stayed silent. But something told me Ayana hadn't accepted defeat, and the next message she sent proved exactly how far she was willing to go to pull Maya back into her world. The next morning, I woke to a long paragraph from Ayana, longer than anything she'd ever written to me in years. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't concern for Maya. It was a carefully structured accusation, almost legal in tone, like someone had coached her overnight. You manipulated Maya. You made her think she isn't wanted here. You're trying to replace me. I will not allow this. Prepare legal consequences. Replace her. As if motherhood were a role someone could steal like jewelry. I forwarded every word to Laura. She responded instantly. She's preparing a narrative. Expect more. More arrived within minutes. We loved her. You poisoned her against us. You're unstable. You abducted my child. Not once did she ask how Maya was. Not once did she mention her happiness, health, or whether she was eating, sleeping, learning. Only possession, control, ownership. That afternoon, we had our first scheduled interview with Child Services. A caseworker named Elena arrived. Sharp-eyed, calm voice. The kind of person who walks into a room and immediately notices who's holding tension. When Elena introduced herself, Maya instinctively hid behind me, fingers gripping my sleeve with surprising force. Elena crouched down, making herself smaller, speaking slowly, gently. She didn't push, she didn't rush. Eventually, Maya sat beside me, close enough to touch but no longer hiding. Elena asked simple questions. Favorite foods, favorite books, favorite places. Maya didn't answer many, but Elena took note of each hesitation like it was its own spoken sentence. Then Elena asked one question I didn't expect. Do you feel safe here? Maya looked at me, then back at Elena, then whispered the smallest, most fragile yes I had ever heard. It wasn't loud, but it was honest. Elena scribbled something in her notebook, expression unreadable, but her eyes stayed soft. When the interview ended, she requested a copy of the doctor's notes, the school absence report, and the texts Ayana sent. I had everything organized in a folder, chronological, labeled, time-stamped, because Laura had drilled into me that courts don't respond to emotion, they respond to evidence. After Elena left, Maya sat quietly at the kitchen table, drawing butterflies in a notebook. Every wing she sketched had uneven lines, like she wasn't sure what freedom looked like in symmetrical form. I was rinsing dishes when my phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. This time I picked up, expecting another detective, another official request for documents, anything. Instead, a man's voice slithered through the receiver. You're going to regret this. You're making things worse. I froze. Who is this? He laughed, low, deliberate. You know exactly who. Ayana's husband. I hadn't heard his voice in months, but arrogance is hard to forget. You don't get to keep what isn't yours. Before I could respond, the line clicked dead. My hands shook. Not from fear, from the realization that this wasn't just custody. It was a battle they intended to win by intimidation. But intimidation would become the least of my worries, because the next move they made didn't just target me, it targeted Maya directly. I sent Laura a brief message explaining the phone call from Ayana's husband. She replied instantly. From this moment forward, any contact from them counts as harassment. Log everything. Do not answer unknown numbers. So I blocked him. Blocked Ayana. Blocked every number they had ever used. But blocking doesn't prevent someone from finding new ways to push. The next day, an envelope arrived at my mailbox with no return address. Inside was a single sheet of printer paper, nothing handwritten, just a typed message in bold font. Her future is not yours to decide. No signature, no explanation, but the message was clear. I took a photo, emailed it to Laura, and tucked the letter beside the growing stack of printed evidence. My kitchen drawer was turning into a legal archive, filled with the remnants of every attempt at control and blame. That evening, Maya seemed unsettled. She picked at her dinner, barely touching her fork. When I asked if something was wrong, she hesitated, teeth pressing into her lower lip like she was testing whether she was allowed to speak. When you were outside, someone asked me questions through the window. My heart slammed against my ribs. What kind of questions? They asked if I missed home and if you made me stay here. Her voice wavered. They asked if you were mean. My breathing turned shallow. What did you say? She shrugged helplessly. I just closed the curtain. I wanted to scream. Not at her, never at her, but at the situation itself, the audacity, the entitlement, the idea that someone felt entitled to approach an 11-year-old child at a window like she was a witness in a crime scene rather than a human being seeking safety. I walked through the house, checking every lock, every blind, every entryway. Fear makes a person thorough in ways they never wanted to be. I considered calling the police, but Laura's words echoed in my mind. Document first, escalate only when necessary. Later, after Maya went to sleep, I sat on the couch, lights dimmed, scrolling through every possible explanation. Was it Ayana? Her husband? Someone they sent? I didn't know, but someone had figured out where we lived. Around midnight, a soft knock sounded on the front door, 3 taps, slow and careful, like someone testing whether we were awake. I didn't move. I stayed frozen until the knocking stopped. Eventually, I must have fallen asleep right there on the couch because I woke up to early morning sunlight and a text from Laura. Emergency custody hearing scheduled. 2 days, be ready. 2 days. 2 days until everything was officially decided, at least temporarily. But just as I was trying to breathe again, Maya stepped into the living room holding a small scrap of paper she found outside the back door. On it, a message written in uneven handwriting. She belongs with us. My stomach dropped. But the worst part wasn't what the message said. It was who I suspected had written it, and what that meant for Maya's future. 2 days later, the courthouse felt colder than any winter morning I'd ever lived through. The walls were beige, the fluorescent lights too bright, the hallways filled with echoing footsteps, and murmured conversations that sounded like secrets trying to disguise themselves as small talk. Maya clung to my hand. I'd never seen her grip anything so tightly. Not the stuffed bear, not a pillow, only my fingers, as if the entire building might swallow her if she let go. Laura arrived 15 minutes early, briefcase in hand, expression composed, but serious. "We'll be in front of a judge who has handled abandonment cases for more than a decade," she explained. "He's firm, but he listens." Ayanna and her husband walked in moments later, all polished confidence and manufactured concern. Her hair curled perfectly, her smile wide, as if this were a brunch invitation rather than a legal proceeding about her daughter's well-being. He placed an arm around her shoulders, almost theatrically, like a stage performance designed for the courtroom audience. Ayanna spotted me and immediately turned her head, whispering dramatically to her attorney. I heard fragments. Brainwashed. Manipulating. Unstable. Every accusation was a projection, every whisper an attempt to rewrite history. Before the judge entered, Maya leaned close and whispered into my sleeve. "Do I have to sit with them?" "No," I whispered back. "You sit with me." She nodded, shoulders trembling. When the judge finally took his seat, everyone rose. His gaze carried the weight of someone who had listened to a lifetime of excuses from parents who never deserved the title. Laura started with the documented absences from school, then the doctor's evaluation, then the messages, printed and organized chronologically, each one revealing Ayanna's pattern of neglect. When she placed the photo of Maya's nearly empty suitcase on the table, the judge's expression grew noticeably harder. Ayanna's attorney objected. "This was an unplanned trip." Laura cut in, voice firm. "International travel with no signed guardianship paperwork is not unplanned. It is abandonment." Ayanna's husband stood up, voice raised. "We left her with family." The judge lifted a hand, silencing him instantly. "Family is not a legal arrangement. You cannot treat a child like an object passed between hands." Maya's eyes widened at the word object, like someone finally said aloud what she'd been feeling all along. After reviewing the evidence, the judge spoke clearly, decisively. "Temporary custody remains with Ms. Naomi. Visitation will be supervised only, pending psychological evaluation and child services report." Ayanna's face collapsed into stunned outrage. Her husband lunged forward, ready to argue, but the judge's gavel hit wood like a thunderclap. Court adjourned. In the hallway afterward, Ayanna stormed toward us. "You turned her against me," she hissed. Before I could respond, Maya stepped behind me, her hand slipping into mine. Voluntary, certain, unafraid. For the first time, Ayanna seemed rattled by the one person she never expected to take a stand. But the real shock came moments later when someone else from Maya's past walked up to us, calling her name. We were only a few steps from the elevator when a man's voice echoed down the hallway, tentative, uneven, like someone afraid of his own words. "Maya?" Maya froze. Not like she was startled, but like her body recognized something before her brain caught up. She turned slowly, eyes wide, posture shrinking as if she might disappear inside herself. The man looked mid-30s, tired, hair unkempt, shirt wrinkled, as though he'd sprinted here without planning. His eyes flicked toward me, then back to Maya, then toward Ayanna. Confusion, guilt, and something else tangled behind his pupils. Ayanna's expression twisted immediately. "You shouldn't be here." His jaw tightened. "She's my daughter, too." I blinked. Her father? The ghost parent? the name barely spoken over the years, the man who drifted in and out long before abandonment became visible to anyone but Maya. Laura stepped protectively between us. Identify yourself? He swallowed hard. Daniel Cruz. Ayanna scoffed. He hasn't shown up in 7 years. This is ridiculous. But Daniel didn't address her. He looked at Maya, eyes glistening. I'm sorry. I didn't know everything. Maya stared at him the way children look at a photo they don't remember taking. Faint recognition, uncertain meaning. She didn't step toward him. She didn't run away. She just stood perfectly still, holding my hand like a lifeline she didn't intend to release. Daniel took a careful step forward, hands raised as if approaching a frightened animal. Maya, I'm sorry I wasn't there. I thought she was okay. I never knew. Ayanna shot him a vicious glare. You abandoned us. Don't act like a hero. He didn't even look at her. I signed away nothing. Legally, I'm still her father. Laura's eyebrows lifted slightly. New information, new complications. Custody cases revolve around details, and Daniel had just thrown an entire new dimension into the courtroom. The judge, who had not yet left the hallway, overheard enough to intervene. Mr. Cruz, if you wish to establish parental involvement, you must contact Child Services and the court through proper channels. This hallway is not a negotiation. Daniel nodded quickly, almost gratefully, as if someone finally gave him instructions instead of blame. Ayanna hissed something under her breath, something sharp and mean enough that even the judge paused, but the words were lost beneath the pounding of my heart. Then Daniel said something quiet, almost to himself, almost to Maya, but loud enough for me to hear. I should have come sooner. I didn't know she was hurting. Maya lowered her eyes, not in anger or fear, but something else entirely. Grief mixed with hope in a way that terrified me. When Ayanna stormed out of the building with her husband pulling her like a storm cloud, Daniel lingered, hesitating. I'm not here to take her. Not yet. I just want to understand what she needs. Not a threat, not a demand. A question. And somehow that scared me more than anything Ayanna ever said, because Maya's heart had room for longing I couldn't predict or control. But Daniel's return wasn't the only surprise, because what Child Services discovered next would change the entire direction of the case. 2 days after the court hearing, Alina from Child Services requested a follow-up meeting, this time at their office downtown. She said they had documents to review, which in bureaucratic language could mean anything from routine paperwork to the kind of revelations that collapse an entire custody argument in one afternoon. Maya held my hand tightly as we walked through the cold corridor leading to Elena's office. The walls were covered with framed posters reminding us of children's rights, safe homes, protective laws. Reminders that existed because too many stories had proven the opposite. Elena greeted us warmly, then gestured toward a thick manila folder sitting on her desk. We obtained school records, medical files, and previous welfare reports, she began carefully. There's information here neither of you were aware of. My pulse kicked up. What kind of information? She opened the folder, flipping through pages with colored clips and yellow sticky notes. We found documented welfare concerns filed by her previous teachers and 2 past investigations regarding potential neglect at home. I stiffened. Past investigations? Elena nodded. They were closed due to lack of response from the household. No follow-up, no cooperation. Ayanna had hidden more than neglect. She'd buried official warnings along with them. What about medical? I asked. Elena exhaled slowly. This may be difficult to hear. She placed a document on the table, medical evaluations from years earlier. Scanned reports indicated missed vaccinations, untreated respiratory infections, and multiple appointments marked no-show. Maya's posture curled inward, like she wanted to sink into the chair. "She didn't take me," she whispered softly. "She said doctors get mad." My heart cracked. Alana continued, flipping to another form signed by Daniel years ago, back when he was present. We also discovered something unusual. Daniel attempted to schedule joint counseling after he and Ayana separated. According to this record, she refused and requested he stay out of parenting decisions from now on. I stared at the document, stunned. Daniel had tried. Even if imperfectly, even if briefly, he had tried. Maya looked at the pages with unreadable confusion, as if the truth contradicted everything she learned to believe about her own deservingness. Elena gathered the papers. She said, "Legally speaking, this strengthens the case for temporary custody with you. But it also means Daniel may file for involvement once he completes background checks and psychological evaluation." I wasn't afraid of Daniel getting involved, not exactly. But the idea of more instability terrified me. Maya needed consistency, not another unpredictable adult circling the edges of her world. Before we left, Elena handed me photocopies of the files, clipped neatly together. "Naomi, something important. If Ayana attempts to remove Maya again, even verbally, we need immediate notification. As of this moment, any contact from her must go through the courts." Maya reached for my hand, this time without fear, without hesitation, just quiet trust. As we walked out of the building, she whispered, "I didn't know there were people who cared if I was okay." I squeezed her fingers gently. There always should have been. But caring wasn't enough, because just 1 week later, Ayana returned with something powerful enough to threaten everything we'd built. A week later, Laura called me in a tone I'd learned to recognize, measured, controlled, but lined with tension. "Naomi, I need you to come to my office this afternoon. Ajana filed a counterclaim." 2 words I never wanted to hear. When I arrived, Laura slid a thick stack of legal paperwork across her desk, freshly filed documents filled with accusations so tangled with exaggeration they almost read like fiction. Ajana alleged I coerced Maya, manipulated her, alienated her, that I staged the doctor's appointment for legal advantage, and that Maya had never shown fear or signs of distress in her care. At the center of the petition was one central claim: parental alienation. Laura rubbed her temples. She's clearly been advised. Someone helped her construct this narrative. Ajana's husband, or maybe an attorney who specialized in flipping blame. Either way, the language wasn't hers. It was too calculated. The petition also included screenshots, out of context, clipped fragments of my messages from months earlier, collected in ways meant to imply instability. "She's weaponizing your kindness," Laura explained. We respond calmly. Evidence speaks louder than accusations. Evidence, we had mountains of it, but logic didn't quiet the ache in my chest when I read the line stating that Maya's well-being dramatically declined after being placed in my home. A lie reversed into a claim. Maya drew quietly in the corner of the office while Laura explained steps and timelines and hearings and counter-responses. She colored shapes and stars, mostly purple, her favorite color now, something she finally felt safe enough to declare. Then Laura paused, choosing her next words carefully. There's something else. Ajana wants emergency visitation rights. A coldness spread through me. Supervised? No. My pulse thudded in my ears. Maya would panic. Laura nodded, which is why we will strongly oppose it. Elena is filing a recommendation that visitation remains supervised until psychological evaluation is complete. I looked toward Maya, head down, quiet, drawing galaxies she wished she lived in, then back to Laura. If Ajana gets unsupervised time, she'll try to take her. Laura didn't disagree. She simply said, "We won't let that happen." But hope didn't automatically translate into certainty. That evening, Maya found me standing motionless in the kitchen, documents scattered across the counter like broken glass. She touched my elbow lightly, a gesture she'd never initiated before. "Are you scared?" she asked. I didn't want to lie. "A little." She nodded, looking at the papers. "When grown-ups get scared, does that mean something bad is going to happen?" "No," I said softly. "It means something bad already happened, and we're doing everything we can to protect each other now." She moved closer, unexpectedly wrapping her arms around my waist, small, tentative, brave. As I held her, I understood something Ajana never had. Attachment isn't possession, it's presence. But I also knew this wasn't the final battle. Ajana had filed her counterclaim, and now the court would decide whether Maya remained safe or was forced to return to the very place she prayed not to go back to. But before the judge could even schedule the next hearing, something happened in our home, something that changed Maya's voice forever. The night before the next court review, Maya woke crying. Not silent tears this time, not muffled sobs into a pillow, but a full, broken cry the house hadn't heard before. I rushed into her room to find her sitting upright, blanket clenched, face wet, breath shaking under the weight of fear she could no longer swallow. She didn't apologize. She didn't try to hide it. She just reached for me. I pulled her into my arms, rocking gently the way I imagine mothers did instinctively. She pressed her forehead into my shoulder, tears seeping through my shirt. "I don't want to go back," she sobbed. "Please don't let them take me." This time there were no whispered replies, no uncertain promises, only truth I'd carried for weeks without saying out loud. "I'll fight for you. I already am." She clung tighter, voice cracking. "But what if the judge doesn't listen?" I brushed her hair back, meeting her eyes. He listened once, and there are more people listening now. Because that was the difference. This time she wasn't alone in her truth. She slowly calmed, breaths evening out, but her hands stayed wrapped around mine like anchors holding her steady in a storm. Eventually, exhaustion drew her back to sleep. I stayed beside her, one hand resting gently over hers, until morning light touched the room. The hearing itself was shorter than any of us expected. Elena presented her findings, the doctor submitted her evaluation, the school sent official absence documentation, and Laura provided a timeline so detailed even the judge appeared stunned by the pattern of negligence. When Ayanna tried to argue, claiming manipulation, emotional coercion, and parental alienation, the judge simply asked one question: "Why did you leave the country for a week without notifying the school, the father, or the court?" Elena's silence answered everything. Supervised visitation remained the only option. No overnights, no unsupervised time, no removal from my home. The judge set a full custody trial for several months later, but until then, continuity of environment and emotional stability were the priority. In plain language, Maya stayed with me. When we walked out of the courthouse, Maya squeezed my hand. "So I live with you now?" "For now," I said honestly. "But maybe forever?" She didn't say it like a request. She said it like a hope she was almost afraid to believe in. I knelt down, eye level. I said, "However long you're here, this is home." Her eyes filled, not with fear this time, but something trembling between relief and possibility. Then, in a tiny voice, she whispered something she'd never dared say before. "Can I call you Mom someday?" My throat locked. I couldn't speak at first. Then, very quietly, I said, "If that's what feels true for you." She smiled, shy and new, like sunlight learning how to shine through a storm that had lasted far too long. And in that moment, I realized something. Her voice wasn't small anymore. It was growing. Stronger. Steadier. Believing. And maybe our story isn't finished here. Maybe this was only the beginning of the chapter where Maya finally learns she was never the problem. She was always the miracle.